Alright everybody, welcome back to Eleum Loyce. I would request you all to prepare for the worst. You see, now that we have undone the storm by talking to the nice lady in the cathedral, there are a number of areas that are now open to explore that were previously not, as well as some chests that were frozen over that are now accessible. So, instead of actually progressing, what we want to do is explore those areas for a couple of reasons. One, we want the goodies. Two, there is a special mechanic in this area that will come into play during the boss fight. I will expand more upon that when we find the relevant mechanic. For now, just rest assured that we're not just doing this to dick around. That's only like 50% of the reasoning, tops. Now, as you are exploring through the now unfrozen Eleum Loyce, you will find that things have become a little bit more difficult to manage. This was actually accessible before we unfroze the place, but it didn't make sense to just come back for this one chest and the other. The Northwarder set is pretty good for casters. It offers fairly good defenses as well as some nice niche bonuses. So the reason things are more difficult now is that, somewhat randomly, the retainers will now rise from their places and attack you. Usually it seems to be that they only do it when you have their back to you. When you have their back to them. I'm sorry, I mixed up who has their back to who. Either way, now that we have the eye and everything is unfrozen, we want to be a lot more careful. Things are different enough that I actually feel sort of compelled to leave a lot of the backtracking in. Going through Eleum Loyce while it's unfrozen is actually quite a different experience, especially since you can see a lot more. Now, the first thing that you will notice when you unfreeze the place is these two little alcoves that were previously blocked off by ice have now melted. This means that you have another retainer to deal with, and also you get some goodies. The retainer staff is actually fairly valuable to us, and I might actually upgrade it a little bit because it is a staff that has no scaling, but it has very high base damage, which is honestly really good for characters that don't invest a lot in intelligence, but still maybe want to have a couple of damage and utility spells just to help them out. Oh, how nice. It sort of falls into that dilemma where all of the good spells kind of cost a lot of intelligence anyway. So if you're a dedicated caster, you won't get much use out of it, and if you're not, there's not much you can even cast with it that benefits from the high damage, but I'm sure we can find something useful. Now, another thing about this area is that a lot of the cover, believe it or not, has been melted away. And that's actually kind of important in this fight. With so many ice soldiers shooting at us, we sort of need to retreat into this corridor so we can deal with them one at a time. I'll take that. In fact, I'm probably going to be blowing through a lot of Radiant Life Gems this episode. I would probably say this is the hardest area in the game now that it's unfrozen, but It's possible that I simply have a unique mental block about it, and it's not that hard. Some free repair powder is always nice, even if it's been iced over for centuries. That just preserves it, right? There's really no safe way to do this except for slowly cutting through. Or, I guess if you wanted to, you could also just blow by everything, though that presents its own dangers. I made a bit of a mistake in stubbornly sticking with the vessel shield this entire time. Being able to block some of this would have been really helpful. Oh good, another one of those. I suppose also I should give full disclosure and say that this is again after I played Bloodborne for quite a while. Mostly doing PvP stuff that I tried to stream and it didn't play nice, so we'll have to try that again sometime. Either way, I am stymied quite a few times in this episode by how radically different a lot of the invincibility frames and dodge mechanics are in here. Comparing the two games side by side is actually quite interesting from the perspective of some of the things that this game gets pretty wrong. But I don't really want to get into that too much because, you know, when you start just doing nothing but ragging on a game nonstop, it starts to become a chore to play. I learned this lesson the hard way several years ago. These 3 chests that we came upon a couple episodes ago are now unfrozen and ready for the looting. It might just be my imagination, but when I was playing through this, I felt like that after the area had become unfrozen, the crystal golems had actually gotten stronger. But it's entirely possible that's just some sort of confirmation bias because I get my ass kicked in this episode. A couple of unique items in here, such as the Sorcerer's Twin Blade. It's a pretty cool weapon, but it requires a pretty demanding stat spread to use, like a lot of these unique DLC weapons do. It's not quite the majestic greatsword, but it's still pretty difficult for the average build to use because it requires a lot of diversification into several different stats, whereas usually the most efficient way to do it is to just pick one stat, get your others up to the point where you can use some key weapons and key spells, and then just pump up your main stats so you get more scaling damage. Even with our fairly generalist build, there's still a lot of weapons that have generalist stat spreads that we just can't use. Because, you know, you also have to go for important things like endurance and vitality. Adaptability, certainly. Something I cannot tell you how glad I am they dumped in Bloodborne. I had no reservations about complaining about adaptability. It's a stupid stat. Now that we have those 3 chests, we can actually explore an all-new area. This chamber was previously blocked off by a big block of ice, but now that it's open, we can take the elevator down into hell. This subsection of Eleum Loyce is probably my least favorite and most difficult section of the game. I'm going to go ahead and send that back up just in case something bad happens. So we are immediately greeted to this site. I'm not even sure what these things are. They appear to be crystal hedgehogs. Either way, they're like the skeleton bone wheels without any of the charm and a couple of additional bugaboos. The thing you'll probably notice when fighting them is not only can they do a ton of damage if they succeed in rolling into you, you also take damage just by being near them. Because of the spikies, I guess. To that end, a long-range weapon will have a much better time dealing with them, but you can't always keep them at a distance. Fortunately, they are not particularly... they don't have a lot of endurance, so with a strong weapon you can take them out 1 or 2 shots. At this point I decide that I need to conserve my healing items and bust out warmth. I'll probably be returning to that little alcove soon enough. Another NPC invasion, this time from Hexer Nikolai. He is a pretty fearsome opponent, actually. Unlike the Holy Knight with a penchant for silver talismans, he does not really screw around with anything. He instead goes right for pretty devastating hexes and miracles, as well as an obnoxious heal. The problem with the heal is, it's hard to tell whether he's doing that or a different miracle until it's a little too late, honestly. So you either have to commit to trying to stop it as soon as you can, or you'll either let him heal or get clocked by whatever it is he casts. His affinity hex is normally something you could only cast with a sorcerer's catalyst. I'm not really sure how he's doing it with a sacred chime, or how he's doing it quite so fast. He is also capable of casting Promise Walk at Peace, which slows everything around him down. This generally hinders you more than it hinders him, because it makes you a much easier target for his spells. If you were a light character, you might consider just going into this fight more or less naked, because what it does basically is that it puts you into the next highest up state of encumbrance. So if you're just below 70%, then you will go up into the over-encumbered state. If you're already there, you will slow down to an absolute crawl and you can't even roll anymore. But if you're wearing nothing at all, then you will probably have a much better time. It's a fairly powerful PvP hex. However, it does take an awful long time to get off. And it requires a somewhat specific build to not get, done in by your own hex. Simply the follow-through from the spear actually caused me to take damage from the spikes, so believe me when I say those guys are fucking obnoxious. We also have to contend with some witch trees in the area who will be all too happy to rain down magical death upon us while we're dealing with the things down below. Previously, witch trees could only be encountered in the dark chasms of old, but with the addition of this DLC, they are now perfectly fine living in the light of day. This is our ultimate way forward, but we need to open the gate somehow. I think just knocking won't cut it. Now, before I deal with anything in this area, there's something I want to do. And that is not get hit by homing soul mass. That really hurt. They tend to pack quite a bit more of a punch than the ones in the Dark Chasm did. There is, glory be, a bonfire in this building back here. I was honestly quite relieved to learn that I could get to this without dying. I thought it was going to take at least 1 or 2 attempts. But the worst is yet to come. Now that we've established a bit of a safe place, we need to work on opening the gate. You are largely free from harassment from the hedgehogs up on the parapet, I guess. But there is still one up here that can really... I can't emphasize this enough. That guy's screwed me over so many times. Just kill him before he kills you. Now I make a bit of a questionable decision here. I want to open that chest, but I don't want to do it while I'm getting hit by magic. So I decide that it's time to engage in a sniper battle. This is not a very good idea on my part because the witch trees don't take an awful lot of physical damage. Even with my great bow and destructive great arrows, I'm simply not doing very much per shot. I mean, eventually, if I find the right range here, and my arrows just don't phase through him for some reason, then I will kill him, but it's not really a sustainable fight. Wars of attrition are very rarely in your favor in this game, simply because the environment will pretty much always win them. And as punishment for my poor judgment, all that was in there was some boltstone. I could just buy that from Blue Sentinel Tagray if I really wanted to. Tagray? Targray? It's been a while since I've talked to him. The dour-looking guy in the blue cathedral. What the? It's you. I am not fooled by your shenanigans, Maldron the assassin. Had we not attacked him there, and we had proceeded on, then he actually would have backstabbed us right around this area, I believe, when we're about to pull a lever. Now, I believe Maldron is wearing the white ring here, which gives you the appearance of a friendly phantom. There are a bunch of rings that alter your appearance, so I might be messing up the name. Either way, the way is open, but Maldron still lives and is probably going to give us a whole lot of trouble if we let him. He retains his usual strategy of simply running away. Also having an enormous pool of hit points. And having ridiculous tracking. I think that's the part that fucks me up the most here. also appears to have almost limitless stamina for sprinting, which is a little obnoxious. Who am I kidding? It's a lot obnoxious. It's Maldron. Who is still somehow capable of using Estus flasks while invading. Now, this is a nasty trap for players who are going through this for the first time. If you blindly pursue Maldron in here as I did, you'll be faced with this nasty combination. There is a white covetous demon as well as Maldron here, though Maldron appears to be having some trouble getting pushed around. The white covetous demon is not a particularly dangerous foe on his own. He simply has the same slow attacks that his predecessor did. Maybe a bit more health. The Helix Halberd actually does an enormous amount of damage to him. I'm sort of surprised. Having a bit of trouble with the camera here. Mostly I don't want to venture out from this corner because I'm pretty sure that would aggro our friend the assassin over there. If we had free run of the place, I probably wouldn't have taken a hit. Our reward for killing that thing is the Ivory Warrior Ring, which is a ring that I believe effectively reduces the stability of enemy shields. I might have actually wanted to equip that right now. But, God, I hate fighting this guy. Even when you roll directly to the side, he can still clip you. I really should have switched to a shield that can actually block here, but I was being stubborn. There are just a lot of things about Maldron that just sort of suck. Like that. That part sucks. There's also the part where the lock-on aiming fails entirely, which is more funny than anything else. I think I definitely won that trade. I think overall I probably deserved that loss. I didn't play that very well. But I will have my revenge. Probably. Fortunately, the white covetous demon does not respawn. So if we find ourselves in that arena again, we don't have to go through the double ringer. I also think that using the Helix Halberd was a bit of a mistake. It was extremely effective against the white covetous demon, but against Maldron it left something to be desired, simply because he was a lot more agile. And that's what I mean about that guy screwing me over, by the way. They do so much damage in such a short amount of time. Oh well, I didn't need those 40,000 souls anyway. Decide to switch up my strategy just a little bit here. I think at about this point during recording, I was feeling real salty and just wanting to be done. So naturally, I make a bunch of mistakes that just prolong it even longer. They also have ridiculous tracking on their roll, like everything else in this area. Completely obnoxious. Speaking of completely obnoxious, Maldron's still here doing emotes. Fuck you, buddy. I have a lot more luck with the Twin Blade, which is extremely effective against humanoid-sized enemies. Maybe nailed him with a plunging attack. But, well, I'm out of stamina and he is not. Still, since the area is largely clear of threats, I'm not particularly upset about having to chase him this far. He has no large slug friend to hide behind. The thing about Maldron, I think, is that unlike most other enemies in this game, he punishes passivity pretty hard. I think he's sort of a precursor to the Bloodborne design philosophy in a way. A couple of nice finds here, especially that large club +8. Might end up using that at some point. And of course, everything about this area is awful. Oh, it's not that bad. I'm just bad at dealing with it. Don't ask me why I used that. I was sort of clicking buttons in frustration. Instead, I wanted to use a human effigy. Now that the gate is open, Maldron is gone, etc., etc., there's nothing to really stop us from just dashing by, not dashing pie, that's a different thing entirely, from dashing by all of the witch trees and hedgehogs over there. They won't really follow you into the cave. Probably because they're afraid of getting eaten by the now dead covetous demon. What was he even doing here, anyway? By the way, time for a rematch with the narrow corridor hedgehogs. Off to a wonderful start. They can also inflict bleeding, just because. fork in the road, we actually have the opportunity to open a shortcut. It's not a particularly good shortcut, but it's there. It leads back out to basically the entranceway to that entire area. The Lower Garrison, I believe it's called on the bonfire list. That's encouraging. Alright, time for, I think, the last new enemy that this area will throw at us. You can actually encounter these up above once everything is unfrozen. The large golems work largely the same way as the golems in Drangleic Castle did, however, with a pretty big difference. You can still activate them with souls from fallen enemies, but the big thing is you don't want to do that. You really don't want to do that, because these guys are hostile. They also hit pretty hard since, you know, they're giant stone statues. Ironically, I still think that the hedgehogs are probably the bigger threat here. Dealing with them both at once is a little much. If you are fortunate enough to hit one of the hedgehogs in mid-roll, you will probably one-shot them. We're in a bit of a pickle now because one of the hedgehog deaths actually activated the other golem. Now, individually, the golems are not too difficult to handle. However, they have this grab attack that drains your souls because fuck you. They have super delayed combos, though, and since they have such high poise, it's almost impossible to interrupt them out of them, so when in doubt, take it slow. They're a good deal easier to handle out in the open, of course, as are a lot of enemies, since you can freely maneuver around them and get in some strong attacks from their blind spot. They're really not that big of a deal. It's mostly just either the environment or the presence of other enemies that can make them big threats. That and the whole soul draining thing is really mean. Just don't get hit by the grab. It's got a long wind-up. I suffer much for my demonstrative purposes. When you deal with them properly, they go down quite quickly. Ah, Theros Lockstone. Reminds me of better days. At any rate, we have popped out mostly what appears to be on the other side of the broken bridge that we first went down the elevator on. Now, said bridge is guarded by 3 crystal golems at once, and I don't think that's a fight that I can win. So I'm going to explore perhaps an alternate route. Of course, going up the hill is not much better, Not only are there more crystal golems, there's also crystal hedgehogs. Though there is a really nice view. If it wasn't built on top of some sort of bizarre hell portal, this would probably be a pretty nice place to live. It's huge, too. That was a low blow. Something that can't happen in Bloodborne, by the way. Just saying. Two at once is difficult, but manageable. Though sometimes your backstabs just don't register. I mean, if it works, but it's still a little galling. Rounding out the menagerie up here is the Rampart Golem, who gets poked to death instead of getting backstabbed because, I don't know. There must be some deficiency I have. Finally, the object of our quest. This is a Loyce Knight. He is not hostile. In fact, he is quite friendly. When you unlock the door, he will notice you and seek the chaos, using a homeward bone to return to the Grand Cathedral, where he will wait. You may have noticed back last video that there was actually a Loyce Knight already waiting there. There's 3 to find, and if you collect all 4, counting the one that starts there, well, you'll have an easier time in a certain boss battle. Now this looks interesting. I wonder what could happen. Very nice. Hal triumphs over nature, which triumphs over golems. Which would have triumphed over Hal, so I guess it's sort of like a rock, paper, scissors kind of thing. Either way, the way is now clear. And along with just from the souls we get from busting up those golems, we get a couple of goodies. Azal's staff, a radiant life gem, and some cracked red-eye orbs. Freebies of those are always appreciated in case I'm feeling mischievous. And that also creates a shortcut back to this area. Nice little bit of creative interconnection. I think that will do it for this time. Instead of risking anything, I'm just going to bone straight back to a bonfire and take a rest. Azal's staff, by the way, is sort of the polar opposite of the Retainer staff. It gives you less uses of spells for more power. I might show that off at some point, though then again I don't have the intelligence. Until then,